You finished up the Hamilton series. What can you tell us about your new book?
Yes, so my new book is called Run. It is the first YA book I've written outside of the town of Hamilton. My first 4 YA books all took place in a small fictional town called Hamilton, which I named after Alexander Hamilton, but before the musical.
You're the original.
I feel incredibly proud of myself. He was always my favorite founding father, so anyway, that's off topic. But no, it's my first book away from that. It's not a romantic comedy like my others were. It's called Run, and it is about 2 best friends in a small southern town who meet, become friends, and run away together. But the book is told in alternating timelines. So as you're watching them run away and see what happens, you're also seeing the events that led them to run away.
Whenever you're writing it, is it just from one perspective, or do you also alternate the perspective?
The perspectives also alternate. So the character of Beau narrates the present as they're running away, and the character of Agnes narrates the past, which was really difficult but really fun to write.
Was it inspired by anything, or just something that you really enjoyed writing about?
So the story is completely not inspired by anything. It was just something I really wanted to write about. But this town was inspired by my hometown. I grew up very poor in a small town in the South, and that was something I didn't see reflected much in the books I was reading as a kid. And so I wanted to write a book kind of reflecting the background I grew up in. So one of my main characters lives in a trailer and, deals a lot with the issues with meth in her town. And the other character, even though she has money for what her town considers money, they're still pretty poor, which was the case where I live. To me, the rich people, really, I now realize were lower middle class. They really weren't rich, but that was just how our town was. And so I wanted to write a story about that, and also about a friendship. And that was something that was always important to me as a teenager, were my friendships. They meant the world to me, and so I wanted to write about that in fiction as well.
Yeah. What was it like for you writing? Do you sit down in a coffee shop or in your own room? Do you blast some music? Is it total silence? What is it like?
It depends. Usually I have music, not on too loud. I usually kind of turn it down just a little bit, and it's usually songs I'm very familiar with and songs that remind me of my characters. So with Run, I listen to a lot of Brandi Carlile, a lot of country, actually, female vocalized country music, but Brandi Carlile probably was the biggest inspiration, particularly the song If There Was No You. I listened to that a lot because I feel like that was my girls' theme song for each other. And so yeah, lots of Brandi Carlile, a little bit of Loretta Lynn on the playlist too. We had some old school stuff.
Whenever you're writing, do you know the ending, or do you kind of write and figure it out as you're writing?
So it depends on the book. Usually I figure out the ending about halfway through. With Run, I knew the ending because actually the first chapter and the last chapter are the same scene, but from 2 different perspectives.
Oh, okay.
So you get to see that the first chapter is the beginning in many ways, but it's also the end. And so that was a really interesting process for me, in that I got to write it from one perspective, and then I actually wrote the last chapter right after writing the first chapter, so I could write it from both girls' perspectives and see how they saw it. And of course, I revised the last chapter to kind of realize, now once I realized kind of where Agnes was by the end of it. That was an interesting experience where the book literally comes full circle from the beginning to end, and so I knew for sure the ending. But usually I figure it out about halfway through.
What do you hope people take away from reading this book?
Oh, from Run. Really that friendships can be just as important as romances in fiction, which is something that I'm very passionate about. Also that people of very different backgrounds can develop very close relationships. One of the main characters in the book is legally blind, the other is bisexual, and that is part of their characters, but it's not the main theme of the story. It's just kind of who they are. And that was so important to me, to show these very, very different girls with this very close, important friendship to them. And the book is also in many ways about how we tell our own stories, how we choose to dictate our past. And so there's a theme of that running throughout of, how am I going to remember this and how am I going to tell this later? And so I'm just so excited for people to read it. I think it's the best thing I've written so far, and it's so special to me.